It is a large slate object. Now, when I say large, it's about 22 inches high. It's maybe a foot wide. And it's a palette. Now, palette. Immediately, everybody thinks of an artist palette. And that's not bad. An artist palette is used to mix paints. You mix paints on it, and you get the color you want, and then you start painting. This was a palette that was also used for mixing. It's slate, smooth stone. The ordinary palette was smaller than the Narmer palette, though. It's about maybe 9 inches across, and sometimes they're shaped like fishes. So it's a nice smooth piece of slate. Think of a tile on a roof, on a slate tile, right, something like that. And the Egyptians ground cosmetics on it. Everybody in ancient Egypt wore cosmetics. Everybody. Now, they put them on their eye, right, under the eyes often. Now, you often see football players wearing black under the eye. That's exactly what the Egyptians were doing. It absorbs the glare of the sun. And in a desert country, it's important. So on their palettes, they could grind their cosmetics. If you wanted to be really zippy, if a woman wanted to really look attractive, she could take some malachite, green stone, grind it, mix it in with fat, and that becomes your cosmetic. Even today, by the way, the basis of all cosmetics is fats. I mean, I will never forget, there's a diversion, I got to tell you, I once went to a chicken store called Pudgy's, which is in New York, and they specialized in chicken that didn't have skin. They took the skin off for people who are on diets and more healthful. And I remember asking the kid behind the counter, I said, what do you do with the chicken skins? I sort of imagined thousands of chicken. I said, well, we have huge buckets of them, and somebody from a cosmetic company comes every night and picks up the buckets, and they make cosmetics. So it comes out of ancient Egypt, mixing your cosmetics with fats. And that's what the palette was used for. Now, the average guy had a small palette. This is big. It couldn't have been used by a person. It's quite different. It's what we call a ceremonial palette. It is used in temples. Now, in an Egyptian temple, there were statues of the gods. You would have a bronze statue, maybe 3 feet high even, of the god Amun, if it's a temple to Amun. You could have a statue of the cat goddess, Bastet. And in the Holy of Holies, these statues were kept in shrines. Every day, the priests would enter the temple, open the doors to the shrine, and anoint the statue of the god with cosmetics. And this Narmer palette, which is really fancy, and it's carved on both sides, decorated, is probably one of these temple palettes. Now, the thing that makes the Narmer palette so special, everyday palettes were flat because you want to just grind your cosmetics. This is carved on both sides, and it tells a story. And as I say, the story is of the unification of Egypt and Narmer conquering. Now for the story. On the first side of the palette, we see a king. And we can tell he's a king because he has a crown, the tall white crown. And he is standing above an enemy. He holds the enemy by the hair. And in his hand, he has a mace. Now, a mace is basically a rock on a stick. It's a round rock which is hollowed out, put on a shaft, and it's used not unlike an axe, say a small hand axe, to smash your enemy's head. So he has a mace in his hand, holding the enemy by the hair, and he's about to smash him. Now, this is a pose, the smiting pose we call it, that is going to be used in Egypt for 3,000 years. 3,000 years after Narmer, the king is going to be shown in exactly the same pose, smiting his enemy. Right? So we have Narmer, white crown, smiting his enemy. Now, how do we know he's Narmer? Right? There are so many firsts on the Narmer palette, I can't emphasize how important it is. We have the first hieroglyphic inscriptions, the first real writing in ancient Egypt on the Narmer palette. At the top of the palette is a little rectangle. That rectangle represents the palace facade. It looks like there's a door going through and a couple of columns maybe. It's very stylized. We call it the serach. This is a palace facade. Okay. Now, inside that rectangle are two little figures drawn. One is a fish.